Business owners often ask, how much money should I actually leave in the business? Now, some people will tell you 3 months of expenses, others will say 6, and some will tell you to leave as little as possible and just pull everything out. The problem is there is no universally right answer. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through how you can figure out the right amounts of retained earnings for your business without guessing, overthinking, or starving yourself in the process. Hi, I'm Matt. I've spent over 25 years building companies as a serial entrepreneur and helping small business owners navigate challenges and avoid costly mistakes. Welcome to the channel, where I strive to answer the questions all business owners have using real-world, practical experience. Let me know how I can help. So what are retained earnings? They are simply the money your business has already earned and chooses to keep inside the business instead of paying it out, whether it's to you or your partners, employees, or to taxes or whatever. It's the cash you intentionally set aside to support how the business operates and grows. Think of it this way. Retained earnings are yesterday's success that supports tomorrow's decisions. Now, that's different from just hoarding cash or being safe or overly conservative just for the sake of it. Retained earnings exist for one reason: to give your business stability, flexibility, and better decision making. Too little cash forces panic decisions and loans. Too much cash often means you're underpaying yourself, you're overworking, or risking burnout. The goal here is balance, not extremes. One of the biggest mistakes with retained earnings is using it to manage personal anxiety. And I get it. Running a business is stressful. Cash feels like control. But retained earnings are not your personal emergency fund. They're not retirement savings. They're not a security blanket because it feels good to see a big number in the bank. I mean, those are all important too. They just belong in different types of accounts. Retained earnings exist to keep the business operating through all the ups and downs of day-to-day operations. If the only reason the money is sitting there is because you're afraid to take it out, that's not solid strategy. That's fear driving decisions. The simplest way I've heard of to think about retained earnings is like you break it into 3 buckets: a little cushion, the shock absorber, and opportunity money. Most small business owners stop at the first one. Here's where you don't want to be normal. Use all 3 buckets, okay? Now, bucket number 1 is operating cushion. And you can think of operating cushion as the money that keeps the lights on when things don't go exactly as planned. These are for things, regular occurrences like payroll, rent, subscriptions, insurance, utilities, the normal monthly expenses. Now, this bucket helps absorb things like maybe a client paying a little late, or a slower than expected month, or maybe just a little billing hiccup. For many small businesses, this is often somewhere around 1 to 3 months of operating expenses, not revenue, actual expenses. In other words, this is the money that lets you sleep at night without nervously checking your bank balance every morning. As for me, I usually shoot to 4 to 5 months, but then again, I like a good night's sleep. Bucket 2 is the shock absorber. Now, this is the money that protects you from expenses that may come eventually, even if you don't know exactly when or what the expense would be. These are things like losing a key client or an unexpected slow season. Maybe you have a major repair or a legal issue, a surprise tax bill. This isn't about if something happens, it's about when. Now, how big this bucket needs to be is different for everyone. Like, is your revenue predictable or kind of lumpy? Are you seasonal or year-round? Are you dependent on 1 or 2 big clients, or do you have a lot? How quickly could you reduce expenses if you absolutely had to? A stable, recurring revenue business might need a smaller shock absorber. A project-based or seasonal business probably needs a bigger one. Okay, bucket 3 is opportunity money, and this is one most small businesses either ignore or just never thought of. This allows you to do things like hire more help, buy or update equipment. Maybe you want to experiment with new marketing or make some new system improvements. Maybe there's a new opportunity that you want to jump on real quick and you don't want to finance stuff. In almost every business, cash gives you leverage. When every decision requires taking out a loan, growth just feels more risky instead of strategic. This bucket isn't about survival, it's about choice. It lets you say yes to the right opportunities and no to the wrong ones with a clear head. Let's talk about a few mistakes I see my clients making. Mistake number one is leaving too little. So you're watching the bank account balance daily. Every unexpected expense feels like a crisis. It can be constant stress. When there isn't enough retained earnings, you're forced into reactive decisions, taking on bad clients, delaying repairs, skipping investments. You're basically trying to do things that will help you survive, but it never really feels stable. And operating in that mode long enough almost always leads to burnout. The second mistake is kind of the opposite. This one is sneaky. It's leaving too much because it almost feels responsible. What I usually see here is an owner who's underpaying themselves, working too much, and telling themselves, I'll take more later. It can also mean you are afraid to spend the money, even if it's for something good like growth. Over time, without realizing it, this can create resentment and exhaustion and a business that has a really nice bank account, but is not growing nearly as fast as it could. Retained earnings should support the business, not feel like a trap to the owner. The third mistake is where you set a retained earnings target once and never revisit it. Now, we aren't talking about rotisserie chicken here. You can't just set it and forget it. Businesses change, revenues and expenses change, risk changes, but a lot of owners are still operating off of a cash strategy that made sense 2 or 3 versions ago. If your revenue has doubled or even halved, but your retained earnings strategy hasn't evolved with it, you're not managing risk, you're just guessing. So, instead of asking for a magic number, you'll need to figure out the right amount of retained earnings to have. Your retained earnings number should be based on everything we talked about, not generic rules of thumb. Spend a little time to figure this out. 2 businesses making the same amount of money can and should have very different retained earnings strategies. That's why there isn't a universal 3-month or 6-month rule. The right number is the one that allows your business to absorb reality without forcing bad decisions. Retained earnings aren't about safety for safety's sake, and it's not about being overly conservative. They're about creating a business that can absorb reality without all the drama. You need enough cash to stay stable, enough cash to grow intentionally, but not so much that the business exists at the expense of your life. There's no perfect number or ratio, but there is a thoughtful, well thought out one. The goal here isn't to starve the business or yourself. It's to build something stable enough to handle growth or downturns without panicking. Thanks for watching. If this was helpful, like, subscribe, and drop a comment or send me an email. I often use those to turn them into future topics. Now, take a breath. You've got this. All right, what's next?